So this shouldn't be too surprising, given the recent video we created about how Nintendo is already working on the next big, amazing, fantastic Legend of Zelda game. But it still should have been confirmed anyways, and now has. According to Eiji Aonuma, Breath of the Wild is done. The Champions Ballad DLC is the finale to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and the game is officially complete. That means they have no more stories or anything else they wish to tell in the world of Breath of the Wild, at least in terms of that singular game. It said that Champions Ballad was the finishing touches to the game, and work has progressed. Again, second confirmation to the next Legend of Zelda game. This obviously begs the question, what is the future of The Legend of Zelda? It's a question I've often pondered myself, and we've briefly touched on it in episodes of the Nintendo Prime podcast in the past. But I want to bring it up specifically now because it's very clear through two confirmations now from Eiji Aonuma that they are going to be focused squarely on the brand new Zelda game moving forward. And anyone who knows anything about me knows that the Legend of Zelda franchise is my favorite video game franchise of all time, and Breath of the Wild is now currently my favorite game of all time, having unseated the previous champ in my mind, potentially the second greatest game of all time, Secret of Mana. And I'm aware that there is actually a sequel to Secret of Mana that is supposedly better, but never came out in the United States. So there's potential that that sequel, if it is significantly better than Secret of Mana, could even unseat Breath of the Wild. But we'll wait and see if that ever comes out in English, because I can't enjoy a game when I can't understand what's happening in that game. But what's interesting to me about thinking about the future of Zelda is that there's so many directions to go. And if we look at the past, there is a chance that we get a quick turnaround sequel. And the reason I say that is not just because, oh my gosh, of course we do, because Breath of the Wild launched and was a cross-generation game. In fact, the fact that the game is a cross-generation game actually works against it, because Nintendo has only created one other cross-generation Zelda game, that being Twilight Princess for the GameCube and Nintendo Wii. But it took 5 years for us to get another main console Zelda game, and that didn't release until 2011. And if you think about that, that was like 5.5 years ago from when Breath of the Wild came out. So just crazy thinking about how long it's been since, you know, the gap between Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, and then Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild. But One Direction is obviously a quick turnaround game, and what works in that favor is that Nintendo has had some shifting games in the past, right? Games that have changed the way that we think about Zelda. Ocarina of Time was one of them, and Ocarina of Time became the best single-platform selling Zelda game of all time. And they quickly followed that up 2 years later with Majora's Mask. The other time that they released a quick turnaround sequel was, well, when Spirit Tracks came out in 2009. In 2007, they released Phantom Hourglass, which again made us use touch controls for everything in the Zelda universe. And as much as I had some disdain for that idea that we couldn't even use the D-pad included to run around on the DS, 2 years later, they released Spirit Tracks. Why? Because Phantom Hourglass was the best-selling handheld Zelda of all time. Still is, to this date. So it is possible we get a quick turnaround game. There's even one more piece of evidence that could at least somewhat prove to be important for a turnaround game. We talked a moment ago about the gap between Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. What we didn't talk about was how this is really crazy when you think back on it. The Wind Waker released in 2003, winter of 2003 in November. Less than 7 months later, they unveiled Twilight Princess. 3 years later, they released Twilight Princess. Think about how crazy of a development cycle that is. And if it wasn't for the fact that they delayed Twilight Princess for Wii, it might have even released in 2015. So it's very, very interesting. For all we know, Nintendo could have been working on a brand new Zelda game for a while now, and they could even unveil it next year. Nintendo has done it before. Just very, very interesting. Or what's more likely is an unveiling in 2019 with a release in winter of 2019 if it's going to be a quick turnaround kind of game. The other direction they can go is to revisit the more traditional handheld top-down Zeldas. And I say traditional handheld top-down because that's primarily where top-down Zeldas have been taking place. Now, we obviously have had Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures in the past, but when we're looking at the future of Zelda, we have to remember that they haven't necessarily given us a hint that they won't do more top-down Zeldas. That's never actually come out of their mouth. It's been an assumption by us because if all of their efforts go into building Zelda games on Switch, why wouldn't they be building these epic, amazing games that sprawl the entire world from a top-down perspective? And the only excuse I can think about for that is that, well, the 3D Zelda games just sell better, right? They sell significantly better. When Phantom Hourglass, which was kind of a 2.5D game, is the best-selling handheld game at 4-something million, that was considered a failure for the Wind Waker. So Zelda games, from the 3D perspective, sell a heck of a lot more. So you could argue it's more worth putting your time into that. But they could release, a traditional top-down game made by, say, Grezzo or somebody in between, just like Grezzo worked on A Link Between Worlds and then eventually Triforce Heroes. So it is possible that we could see a top-down Zelda. We should not rule that possibility out. What I also think is highly likely, especially in 2018, if we're looking for something Zelda to play in 2018, you can either be looking to a Hyrule Warriors 2, which, I mean, Hyrule Warriors is one of the best-selling Musou games in a heck of a long time. Probably even better selling than the Fire Emblem one. So it's possible we could see Hyrule Warriors 2. Or Skyward Sword HD. We should not discount the fact that Skyward Sword is currently the only home console game that has not been remastered at least one time. I know a lot of us would like to see Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask brought into HD as well, but I feel like it's Skyward Sword's turn, and there's no better system to do it on than Switch, which already has motion controls. So they wouldn't necessarily need to change up the control scheme to work with buttons and joysticks. Now, they could do that. They very well could add that in, especially for people who want to play portably, where using motion controls might not be, shall we say, convenient. But reality is that the control scheme for Skyward Sword HD does exist, and they could make that a reality. We also know they're porting Twilight Princess in HD and stuff like that over to the the NVIDIA Shield in China. So that's obviously a possibility to come out on Switch, since the NVIDIA Shield uses the Tegra X1, the exact same technology that powers the Nintendo Switch. So that's a possibility as well. Although at that point, it's more so, it's probably going to be a port of the already existing HD version, if I had to guess. And I feel like we should be getting a combo pack of Twilight Princess HD and the Wind Waker HD for $40 on Switch. Just my opinion. If they do a combo pack, it's probably going to end up being $60, just so they can hit that sweet price point that they like. Or maybe they release them individually again for $60, because it is Nintendo, and that's what they value their games at. That's a potential direction as well, and we can't ignore that. And this is all based on the history of Nintendo, right? They've done this kind of stuff in the past. What they haven't really done, and this is somewhat overlooked, is taking their time to make a new Zelda game, but not really giving us much in between. It is possible that after us getting basically beat over the head with something Zelda every year for so long, that Nintendo's just not going to give us anything. There had been a pattern where we got either Hyrule Warriors or a remaster, or sometimes a remaster plus Hyrule Warriors. And then you would get a top-down game, and then another, remake, another remaster, and then boom, we get a brand new, big, sprawling Zelda game. Then we get another top-down game, and then a remaster. And like, Nintendo's been beating that pattern into our head for like 10 years now. It's been a while. And that pattern could be coming to an end here in 2018. It's potentially that we don't get a Skyward Sword HD, that we don't get a Hyrule Warriors 2, that we don't get a top-down Zelda. It's possible we don't get any Zelda games in 2018. It's possible we don't get any Zelda games in 2019. What I do think is possible in all of this is that Nintendo takes their time to build this brand new Zelda, whether it's a sequel to to Breath of the Wild or not. Instead of rushing one out, they hit a full 3-year cycle, which is what Eiji Aonomo has said in the past. He wants to hit a 3-year development cycle on big Zelda games. So assuming they keep the engine, right? Maybe not the visual and graphic styles, but the physics engine and everything they built and spent so much time building for Breath of the Wild. They keep that base engine behind the game. Create a new art style, new assets, also a new world around it, a new idea around all of this stuff. And they present it to us in 3 years, and they release it in 3 years. That, I feel like, is a highly likely option for the future of Zelda as well. Whatever that idea might be. Whether it comes after Breath of the Wild, or they go back in time and revisit some of the other, the prior timelines and some gaps that are in those timelines. Maybe we get a game that takes place 100 years ago. There's a lot of, 100 years ago for Breath of the Wild, so all that stuff that happened before Link failed. There's a lot of opportunities here for that kind of game to exist, and for it to take 3 years. The other option obviously could take another full 5 years, and then we get no Zelda games in between. Although I think if there's going to be a 5-year gap, 2 years in, we would get something like Skyward Sword HD or a top-down Zelda or something to kind of fill the gap, because Nintendo is not going to let us go 5 years without anything Zelda, because it's just such an important IP for them that sells way too well just by slapping it really on anything, that they're going to give us something if it's 5 years. But I think it is possible that we could go 3 years here without seeing a Zelda game, and then bam, another Zelda game on Switch. And that, to me, again, is the sweet spot. I realize that that's probably coming towards the end of the Switch's lifespan too, and we could be talking about, how it should be cross-platform again and be in the Switch 2 or whatever's coming out, the Switch Pro. But the lifespan of the Switch is probably going to be at least 5 years. That's a traditional console cycle. So if it releases 3 years from now, in 2020, that's not that big of a deal. The Switch should still be alive and kicking. It should still have over a year of life left. And this assumes that they don't do the iterative thing, right? Which is what I want Nintendo to do anyways, where they do release a Switch 2, but it can play the entire back catalog of Nintendo Switch games, while some games that come out on Switch 2 can also be played natively on the OG Switch, while there'll be certain games that obviously you need to upgrade to take advantage of, or if all the games are cross-platform, but on Switch 2 you get them at 1080p, 60 FPS, or 4K, or whatever the case may be. Enhanced, HD Rumble, maybe it's like HDD Rumble, HD Plus Rumble, whatever the case may be. Just some ideas I'm throwing out there. These are all the potential futures I see for the Legend of Zelda franchise, now that they are confirmed twice now by the man who runs, the general producer of the entire Zelda series, that they are working on one and they are done. Now, as of today, officially stating they are done with the Champions Ballad, which really they were probably done with that a month or so ago. You guys let me know what you think the future of the Legend of Zelda series is down in the comments below. I am Nathaniel Ruffledance from Nintendo Prime, and if you like this video, you know what to do. And if you dislike this video, hit that dislike button. Subscribe for more content, and I will catch you in the next one.